Summer 1943, Camp Crossville, Tennessee. A German soldier stared at the fizzing brown liquid in his bottle, completely transfixed. He'd never seen anything like it. After 2 years fighting in North Africa, surviving on dry biscuits and ersatz coffee, this sweet, bubbly drink, Coca-Cola, felt like something out of a dream, and it only cost a nickel at the camp canteen. The guards told him American kids paid the same price with their allowance money that summer across American prison camps. 371,683 German POWs ran headlong into a reality that blew apart everything Nazi propaganda had hammered into them about American weakness. Here, ice cream was just dessert, something you ate after lunch. Soft drinks and candy bars, everyday stuff. Guards even handed out sweets as if they were nothing. Most German kids had never even tasted these treats, let alone eaten them so casually. And as the Germans discovered this world of abundance, their old ideas, the ones about American poverty and decadence, fell apart. Sugar, carbonation, chocolate, ice cream, they all spelled out a different kind of math. Not noble deprivation, but needless suffering. American industry had simply outpaced them, and it showed up in every bite. Amazement at American food didn't just stop at surprise. It changed these men deep down. The desert was behind them. When the Afrika Korps finally surrendered in Tunisia in May 1943, around 250,000 German and Italian soldiers found themselves in Allied hands. These were tough men, experienced, used to hardship, and braced for cruelty. Nazi propaganda had warned them Americans would starve and abuse their prisoners, but the reality couldn't have been more different. Within hours of surrender, they received American K rations, the same ones U.S. soldiers grumbled about. For the Germans, though, these field meals were pure luxury. Crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar tablets, cigarettes. Men who'd survived for months on almost nothing treated these rations like banquets. Military records show that in the processing camps in North Africa, the U.S. Army served pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk. German rations hadn't seen those foods in years, so from the start, the Americans fed their enemies better than the Germans had fed their own troops. The psychological impact, that would take time to sink in. One German officer later told the International Red Cross, "We expected to be starved as prisoners. Instead, the Americans fed us better than our own army had." That confusion about American resources was the start of our education. The Liberty ships that hauled prisoners across the Atlantic that summer kept up the lesson in American plenty. These ships were cranked out faster than anyone thought possible, one every 42 hours at peak production. They carried up to 30,000 POWs a month to the States. Naval records show prisoners got rations on par with, or even better than, the crew. About 3,500 calories a day, including fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and coffee with sugar and milk. The ship's refrigeration systems, just standard kit on American vessels, kept the food fresh all the way. Ice cream made occasional appearances too. The log of the USS General M.B. Stewart from July 1943 notes that they served ice cream to prisoners on July 4th, churning out 10 gallons at a time in the ship's own ice cream maker. For men who hadn't seen ice cream since before the war, eating it in the middle of the Atlantic was almost surreal. The real shock came when the ships docked at ports like Norfolk and Newport News. Nazi propaganda had painted America as a land of scarcity. Now the Germans saw the truth with their own eyes. The Norfolk Naval Base sprawled over 4,300 acres and moved more cargo in a day than major German ports did in a week. At the port exchanges, little shops for dock workers, the prisoners peered through the windows at shelves overflowing with candy bars from Hershey, Mars, Nestle, all at the standard price, 5 cents, the same as everywhere else in the country. Procurement records from 1943 show dozens of kinds of candy, all sold at prices any American could pay. The journey inland by train opened their eyes even more. In Europe, prisoners traveled in cattle cars. Here, they rode in passenger coaches, and the dining cars, they served proper meals. Menus from July 1943 listed fried chicken, vegetables, pie, and coffee. This wasn't special treatment. It was just how Americans traveled by train. The prison camps themselves, scattered across the U.S., offered conditions that went beyond what the Geneva Convention required. Camp Crossville was typical for a large facility, electric lights, hot water, flush toilets, heated barracks. But it was the camp exchanges, the PX stores, that left the deepest mark. Army quartermaster records paint a pretty vivid picture of daily life in the camps. The exchanges there weren't just stocked with 1 or 2 treats, they offered a whole lineup. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, candy bars of all kinds, ice cream if there was refrigeration, fruit, snacks, cigarettes, tobacco, and beer, though only 3.2% alcohol for what that's worth. Prisoners earned 80 cents a day for their labor, then got a raise to $1. Candy bars and a Coke each cost a nickel, so a day's wage could buy 16 treats, a kind of abundance German prisoners could hardly believe. Back home, that sort of stuff was rare or maybe just impossible to get unless you knew someone. Coca-Cola really stood out. It became more than just a drink. It was almost a symbol of what American industry and democracy meant. The Coca-Cola company cranked out incredible numbers during the war, 5 billion bottles in 1943 alone. The military made sure every American serviceman anywhere in the world could buy a Coke for a nickel. That kind of promise took some serious logistics. German prisoners, most of whom had never seen Coca-Cola before, found it everywhere. Camps got regular shipments. If you went out on work detail, you'd spot vending machines and coolers all over the place, at gas stations, factories, schools. Americans of every age just drank it whenever they wanted, and sometimes tossed out half-finished bottles like it was nothing. The technical-minded prisoners noticed something else. The taste never changed, no matter where you were in the country. That kind of standardization just didn't exist in German industry, and it shook their ideas about American chaos. Coca-Cola's syrup came from Atlanta and went out to bottling plants all over the U.S., a machine that just ran no matter what. Coca-Cola's own records show that many prison camps got 200 to 300 cases every week, each with 24 bottles. Camp Hearn in Texas alone went through about 7,000 bottles a week in the summer of 1943. Ice cream was another shock. Most Germans hadn't seen it since before the war, and the idea of ice cream in a prison camp sounded impossible. But army records show it was real. Wherever there was enough refrigeration, prisoners got ice cream during the summer. The military saw it as important for morale, so important they even built special ice cream ships for the Pacific Fleet. At Camp Shelby in Mississippi on July 4, 1943, they made ice cream on site. Prisoners watched Americans crank out gallons using ice, salt, cream, sugar, and flavorings. Seeing ice in July and cream and sugar used for a treat really drove home how different the priorities were. By 1944, electric ice cream makers showed up in many camps. The flavors, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, butter, pecan, actually beat what German ice cream shops offered before the war. Prisoners could buy ice cream bars or sandwiches for a dime, or cups of whatever flavor they liked. Army records show big camps ordered 50 to 100 gallons a week in the summer. The schedule changed by season and place, but for the prisoners, ice cream was a regular part of camp life, even though it had disappeared from daily life in Germany. Sugar was maybe the biggest shock of all. In Germany, sugar was rationed 280 grams a month if you could get it. In the American camps, there were bowls of sugar on the mess hall tables, free to use as much as you wanted. Quartermaster records from 1943 to 1945 show the camps got 100-pound bags of refined sugar every week. Camp bakeries didn't hold back. They made cakes, cookies, pies, and sweetened everything from coffee to cereal. There's a story from Camp Aliceville, Alabama. In August 1943, the humid weather ruined several 100 pounds of sugar, making it hard as a rock. Instead of trying to salvage it, the American kitchen staff just threw it out and ordered more. The German prisoners working in the kitchen were shocked by the waste. Chocolate told its own story about American abundance. Hershey, Mars, Nestle, all the big companies pumped out millions of bars every month, even with wartime restrictions. The military alone bought 380 million pounds of chocolate during the war. Prison camp exchanges offered several kinds of chocolate, standard Hershey bars, rations, emergency bars, and all sorts of candy bars for 5 or 10 cents each. Germans discovered Americans had favorites and would just pick and choose what they wanted. Then there were the Red Cross packages. Every month, prisoners got parcels with chocolate or candy bars, instant coffee, processed cheese, crackers, canned meat, cigarettes, soap, the kind of luxury items German civilians would have considered basic rations. For the prisoners, it was proof that for Americans, plenty wasn't a dream, it was just normal life. Thanksgiving in 1943 was a real eye-opener for German prisoners in America. For the first time, they saw just how much food and effort went into this holiday. The army made sure every prison camp served a classic Thanksgiving dinner: roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee, and milk. Organizing turkey dinners for 425,000 prisoners on top of millions of American soldiers all over the world took serious logistical muscle. And the fact that German prisoners ate the exact same meal as American soldiers sent a message: everyone gets treated the same here, no matter what the Nazis preached about racial hierarchy. Christmas that year brought even more surprises. Civilians, church groups, civic clubs, and just regular folks sent Christmas packages to German prisoners. The American Friends Service Committee handed out 50,000 packages by itself. Inside, homemade cookies, candy, toiletries, books, games, cigarettes, writing supplies. People living near the camps often pitched in too. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, townspeople brought treats to the prisoners at Camp Tonkawa. In Hearne, Texas, church groups delivered cookies and candy to Camp Hearne. This kind of generosity towards the enemy ran totally against Nazi ideas about who deserved compassion. Even with family members fighting overseas, Americans chose mercy over revenge. They believed in showing strength by being fair and kind. As labor shortages got worse, the army sent more German prisoners out to work. By 1944, about 100,000 of them worked in American farms and food plants, seeing the country's abundance up close. In Michigan, they picked cherries for maraschino production, the same bright red cherries you'd find on top of an ice cream sundae. The sheer amount shocked them. One orchard could turn out tons of cherries just for decoration. At canneries, they saw workers toss aside perfectly good fruit just because of tiny blemishes. Del Monte records from 1944 show about 15% of fruit was rejected for canning over small flaws and sent off as animal feed instead. In Colorado and Nebraska, sugar beet processing plants ran on a scale Germany had never managed. Single American farms produced more beets than entire German regions. Prisoners learned America produced around 7 million tons of sugar a year from cane and beets. No wonder the food seemed endless. Some prisoners worked near schools and saw early school lunch programs in action. Kids ate hot meals with milk, protein, and vegetables. The National School Lunch Act wouldn't become law until 1946, but the groundwork was already there during the war. The daily delivery of fresh milk to thousands of schools especially impressed German prisoners. They couldn't believe America managed this for school children when Germany struggled to do the same even for its soldiers. Sometimes cafeterias even sold ice cream. The idea that kids could buy frozen desserts at school while German children went hungry left a lasting impression. Minimum security prisoners sometimes ate at American diners under guard. Even small-town restaurants had menus that would have seemed fancy back in Germany, but here, anyone could order anything. In 1944, a hamburger cost 25 cents, a Coke was a nickel, a slice of pie 15 cents, an ice cream sundae 25 cents, and a full dinner special ran 65 to 75 cents. Everyone got the same service, whether they were a factory worker or a bank president. The same waitress served everyone at the same counter for the same price, breaking down the class barriers the Germans were used to. As prisoners read American newspapers and magazines, they came across production numbers that blew German figures out of the water. America made about 7 million tons of sugar, 380 million pounds of chocolate and cocoa products for the military alone, 5 billion bottles of Coca-Cola just in 1943, over 500 million gallons of ice cream, and 119 billion pounds of milk. Meanwhile, German sugar was strictly rationed. Chocolate went almost entirely to soldiers, soft drinks were nearly non-existent, and ice cream was just a dream. Milk was rationed too. The fact that Americans published these numbers openly showed just how far ahead their production was, even compared to Germany's best years before the war. By late 1944, the tables had turned so much that German prisoners were actually sending food packages back home. Using their camp wages, they bought American chocolate bars, instant coffee, and canned goods to mail to Germany. International Red Cross records backed this up, a complete reversal from the early days of the war. While German POWs sat in American camps, they sent around 11 million packages back home, mostly food. Imagine the effect: German families starving in freedom, opening parcels stuffed with American plenty from their imprisoned sons or fathers. The message couldn't have been clearer: Nazi promises of superiority, shattered by boxes of Spam, chocolate, and coffee. Meanwhile, rationing in America looked generous compared to Germany. Americans grumbled about getting only 2 pounds of sugar a month, but that was still 3 times more than Germans ever saw. Meat? Americans got 28 ounces per person every week. Germans might get that much in a month if they were lucky. Even with rationing, Americans ate at a level Germans couldn't imagine. Records from the Office of Price Administration show Americans bought 74 pounds of sugar per person in 1944, even under restrictions 10 times what Germans had. And it wasn't just the basics. German prisoners discovered America's obsession with soft drinks: Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush, and a dozen local sodas competing everywhere. Every city had bottling plants churning out millions of bottles a year. The technology was streamlined, the distribution network reached the tiniest towns, and by the end of the war, Americans were drinking billions of bottles a year. Just the output of this one industry dwarfed entire sectors of German consumer production. By spring 1945, the contrast hit home even harder. Newsreels showed American GIs handing out chocolate and gum to German kids, kids whose own government left them hungry. The sight of enemy soldiers giving away sweets their parents couldn't provide finished off the last shreds of the Nazi myth. German POWs watched, realizing American troops could hand out candy as they marched through enemy territory, while the victorious German state delivered only starvation. Then came the footage of concentration camp liberations, American soldiers sharing rations with survivors, treating them like people, not enemies. That kind of humanity shook the POWs. When the camps finally emptied in 1945 and 1946, the German prisoners went home healthier and heavier than when they'd arrived, while their families had wasted away. They brought back a taste of American abundance. Medical checks proved it. These guys were in better shape than when they were captured. Some carried home Red Cross parcels, coffee, chocolate, canned goods, treasures in a country where kids had forgotten what chocolate even tasted like. Fathers handed out Hershey bars, recalling the ice cream they'd eaten in the prison camps. Something else changed, too. These former POWs, who'd seen for themselves that American prosperity came from making things, not stealing them, became unexpected supporters of the Marshall Plan. They'd witnessed that abundance wasn't a zero-sum game. America could rebuild its enemies because it produced so much. They'd seen a society so rich it could waste food during a world war. This mindset, prosperity through creation, not conquest, helped shape the West German economic miracle in the 1950s. Men who'd watched American factories, distribution, and consumer goods in action brought those ideas home. They learned that mass production made luxuries affordable, standardization meant quality, and when people had enough, society stayed stable. They realized industrial democracy could outproduce any dictatorship. Lessons from Coca-Cola and ice cream shaped a generation of German leaders. The story's all there in quartermaster records, Red Cross reports, company archives, POW letters, interviews, and especially in the work of historian Arnold Krammer. Krammer showed that food, more than propaganda, broke the back of Nazi ideology. The statistics make it plain. From 1943 to 1946, the average German POW in America ate 3,300 to 3,600 calories a day, got 4 pounds of sugar a month, and enjoyed 32 ounces of meat each week. In the end, it was the simple fact of American plenty and the chance to taste it that rewrote their beliefs for good. Every day, prisoners got a whole quart of milk. Ice cream? Served all the time in summer. Soft drinks were pretty much unlimited, just 5 cents each. Now, compare that to what German civilians got back home during the same period, 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day if they were lucky. Sugar, maybe 280 grams a month, and only when it actually showed up. Meat, 10.5 ounces a week, but often not even that. Milk was tightly rationed, ice cream didn't exist, and soft drinks were simply nowhere to be found. This wasn't propaganda. These were the facts. Enemy prisoners ate better than the German civilians they left behind. American abundance reached even the men who had fought against them. It's no exaggeration to say that this experience with American food changed Germany after the war. Coca-Cola came back to West Germany in 1949 and turned into a symbol of the new alliance. Suddenly, German cities had American-style ice cream parlors, candy bars, and chewing gum became tiny beacons of hope. Some former prisoners of war actually started importing American food because they knew from personal experience just how much it meant. They understood these products weren't just snacks. They represented abundance, democracy, and something new. Supermarkets showed up in Germany in the 1950s, and you can thank those same former prisoners for it. They'd seen American grocery stores firsthand, and they realized that real abundance wasn't just about making more stuff, it was about getting it to people in smarter ways. In interview after interview, former German POWs kept coming back to one thing: food. They said that kind of plenty changed everything. One former Afrika Korps officer put it bluntly in 1975, "We expected to defeat a weak, divided America. Instead, we found a nation that could give ice cream to enemies. That's when we knew we had lost more than a war. We had lost our entire worldview." Another veteran years later remembered his first Coca-Cola. It was like drinking the future: sweet, fizzing, completely unnecessary, and available to anyone for a nickel. That drink contained everything Nazi Germany wasn't: abundant, democratic, joyful. Stories like these, collected decades apart, all point to the same thing. American food abundance did what defeat alone couldn't. It changed minds. Men who arrived as Nazi soldiers left as witnesses to a different kind of prosperity. Historians agree the American POW experience in the US was a success, and not because of re-education classes or lectures. It worked because the prisoners saw it for themselves. They watched Americans work, produce, and share, even with their enemies. Food made the difference. Hunger and satisfaction. Everyone gets that. And you could see the results. Men gained weight, their health improved, 3 meals every day, plus whatever they bought at the canteen. These prisoners knew what deprivation felt like. Every meal became proof of American power. Every Coke showed off mass production and smart distribution. Every ice cream sundae was a little lesson in democracy. When those POWs went home, their kids grew up on stories about American abundance in prison camps. At first, these stories sounded impossible, but as West Germany bounced back and American products hit shelves, people saw it was true. The mythology of American plenty, born in prison camps, started shaping German-American relations for generations. Some of those kids ended up studying or working in the US, drawn by their fathers' tales of endless food and choice, and they discovered reality matched the stories. Grocery stores packed with every kind of food you could imagine. Soda fountains, candy aisles overflowing with options. It didn't stop with individuals. West German business culture soaked up ideas about consumer abundance, standardization, and open markets. The economic miracle wasn't just about making more stuff. It was about making life abundant for ordinary people. Fast forward to today, Germany has over 1,400 McDonald's. Coca-Cola is everywhere. Ice cream is just another snack. Scarcity gave way to plenty, and it all started in those American prison camps. But the lesson sticks. Ideologies can shift not just through defeat or deprivation, but through kindness and the simple act of sharing. The German POWs, who couldn't believe they were getting ice cream and Coke in enemy camps, saw democracy's best weapon in action: the power to create so much you could afford to share it, even with your former enemies. It's a wild victory, a war won by generosity, an ideology toppled by ice cream, a worldview shattered by soft drinks. These men changed not because they were punished, but because they saw a different way of living. They came in believing in their own strength. They left knowing that true power is the ability to offer Coca-Cola to prisoners for a nickel without even blinking. That's the kind of strength that lasts. Picture an ice cream sundae, scoops piled high, syrup drenching everything, whipped cream, nuts, and a cherry on top. For the Germans, seeing this wasn't just dessert. It was a shock. Even one of those ingredients would have felt out of reach during the war. But here, it all came together, and nobody thought twice. Americans just ordered more if they wanted. Meanwhile, German kids went hungry. That contrast said everything about how badly the Nazis had failed. Guys who'd been prisoners of war talked about these moments years later. They remembered the first hiss of a Coca-Cola bottle, their first cold spoonful of ice cream, the first bite into a Hershey bar. Those tastes hit harder than any speech ever could. In that sweetness, they tasted democracy itself. There was no going back after that. Men who'd once marched for the Third Reich came home changed, spreading the word that freedom, not a conquest, brought real prosperity. America's secret weapon wasn't the army. It was generosity. They handed out ice cream to their enemies, and that did what no bomb or bullet could. Changed minds, changed hearts. Those German POWs who never imagined such abundance became its loudest witnesses. They carried home a wild truth. Democracy tasted like chocolate, and freedom fizzed in your mouth. Their stories remind us of something simple. Sometimes you win by showing a better way, by giving instead of taking, by sharing ice cream on a hot day, even with your enemies. The men who tasted American abundance behind barbed wire ended up as freedom's most surprising ambassadors, forever changed by the strange, sweet reality of Coca-Cola and ice cream served up in places they never expected.